What happens when a man leaves intensive care and discovers that his life has been sold along with his house, his name, and his voice? He remains silent, observes, and begins to dismantle everything piece by piece. What he does next will leave the entire system in silence. If someone had told me that one day I'd be lying in the emergency room with a tube down my throat, unable to move a finger, while my wife sold everything we'd spent almost 20 years building, I wouldn't have believed it. Seriously. I'm the same guy who carries packages to the neighbor, shovels snow on other people's steps, and pays his taxes a day early. Yeah, I'm not a TV star. I'm Rick, an architect, a man who believed in people a little longer than he should have. The morning that started it all was an ordinary morning. Friday. I took the food to Mrs. Grayson, an elderly woman who had once taught me at school. She lived alone in a house where the wallpaper had peeled off before the pandemic. I stopped by every 2 weeks, not out of gratitude, out of conscience. This time I brought her favorite barbecue beans and some old school photos I found in a box in the attic. She didn't recognize me right away. Her eyes were glassy, her breathing heavy. We sat in her room for about an hour. I read aloud her own essays that she'd graded, and at one point she just exhaled. No sound, no scene. I sat next to her, holding her hand. When the nurse came in, I already knew. Mrs. Grayson was gone. Quietly, like a light turned off. On the way out, I felt sick. My heart was beating in my throat. My palms were sweating. I chalked it up to nerves. It's not every day you bury an old lady morally. But 3 blocks later, I collapsed right in the middle of the sidewalk like a sack of potatoes. No epilogue, just pop, and that was it. I woke up in the emergency room, light in my eyes, tube down my throat, hands tied. I couldn't talk or move. Someone said something about shock, about intubation, about a week in an induced coma. But I didn't care. I was trying to figure out where I was, who was around me, where she was. Where's Brianna? But the room was empty. A day, a second, 3. No one came. Not even a text message. Just a nurse named Lorraine who brought water and occasionally put the TV on minimum volume. On the 5th day, I could blink on command. On the 7th, I could move a finger. And then they brought me a cell phone. It was old and battered, but it turned on. The fingerprint worked. First notification from the bank, account closed. Access restricted. I thought it was a mistake. Second notification from the insurance company. Beneficiary has been changed. Confirmation processed. The third is a receipt for a car sale. My car, Carl, the same car I fixed every Saturday with beer and radio. At first I tried to explain it to myself. Maybe it was an emergency. Maybe she didn't realize. But when I saw the lease termination agreement, our house, I realized, it's not a mistake. It's a sale. Me, my life. While I lay there like a vegetable, she was, it turns out, quite cheerfully running the household. I didn't scream. I couldn't. But I was burning up inside. I was building this house myself, nail by nail, brick by brick. She picked out the curtains. I laid the pipes. The two of us put this goddamn corner of the world together, and she sold it like a second-hand jacket. After a couple days, I started talking. Quiet, husky, but enough for the nurse to understand. Call Brianna. The number listed is disconnected, sir, she answered. And the alternate? You no longer have any emergency contacts in your profile. That's it. I'm a useless line on someone else's profile. A nobody, nothing. When I was finally transferred to a regular room and I saw myself in the mirror for the first time, I didn't even recognize my reflection. My face had aged about 10 years, eyes like an abandoned dog, and only one question pounded in my head: why? There was no answer. Only the echo of a distant life that someone had managed to drag away until I couldn't even say, stop. The next day, I asked Lorraine to bring me my laptop. It was old and password protected, but the imprint worked again. The first thing I did was open the mail. There were hundreds of emails, but not from friends, not from my wife, but from banks, services, insurance companies. 8 change of beneficiary notices, 3 notices to close savings accounts, and 1 from the real estate registry, confirming the transaction. The new owner was some company with a vague name, but I knew it was her, through someone who helped her get the deed done while I was bedridden. I tried her social media. Gone. Accounts deleted. Phones off. Friends? No one to ask. We weren't the kind of people who threw loud parties. I wasn't much of a party person myself. Withdrawn, stubborn, rule-bound. But I was always there for her when she was in trouble. When her mom died, I sat with her 3 nights in a row. When she lost her job, I said, "It's okay, we'll get by." And now I'm out. No discussion, no goodbye. Not even a stupid note on the fridge. I lay there thinking, maybe I really was a bad husband. Maybe she was tired. But then I remembered the way she'd look at me when I was fixing the kitchen door, or how she'd fall asleep with her head on my shoulder. Those looks didn't lie. They didn't lie then. And now? Now she's turned everything we had into assets and cashed it in. When the doctor came in, he said, "You're progressing nicely. I think we'll be out of here in a week." I nodded. What else could I do? Go back? Back to where? To who? I asked the nurse to bring me a piece of paper and a pen. I wrote my name. I wrote an address that wasn't mine anymore. Wrote a number that no longer worked. It looked like a funeral bulletin, only without the date of death. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the air conditioning dripping in the hallway, and I thought maybe I really am gone. Not in the legal sense, but in the human sense. Because when a person becomes redundant, it doesn't even sound like a blow. It's silence. A dense, heavy silence in which you disappear slowly, layer by layer. But damn it, if I'm disappearing, I at least want to know who pushed the button. In the morning, a woman in a strict suit entered the room. No badge, no smile. Sat down next to her and pulled out a file. "Minus Mr. Thompson, do you confirm that you're waiving your post-discharge coverage?" I almost choked. "I'm sorry, what?" "We have your signed waiver," she said calmly. "Here's a copy." I looked at the paper with a signature that should have been mine, but it wasn't my handwriting. Not my letters, not even my mistakes. I didn't sign it. "I'm sorry, but it's certified." "Where? When? I was in a coma." "We'll do an internal review," she mumbled and walked out. So much for the system. While you're out, someone signs your life away on your behalf. And then they smile politely at you and say, "It's all legal. Damn their laws." At lunchtime, Lorraine came in. She saw my face and knew right away. "What's wrong?" I gave her a copy of the paper. She read it. She sat down. She took my hand in silence. "You want me to call the local human rights office?" I nodded. Not because I believed, but because at least someone else believed in me. In the evening, they brought me a plastic container of dinner. Chicken, oversalted rice, and a dry bun. On the lid was the room number and in marker, "Diet Light." I chuckled. Lightened is like my life, only without the flavor. Before I went to bed, I turned my phone back on. There was one missed call from an unknown number. No voicemail, just a call. I pressed call back. There was no answer. The line went dead. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and I knew one thing. If I got out of here, I'd get my name back. Even if I had to scratch it out all over again. On every door, on every piece of paper, on every check. And if anyone decides to hit the erase button again, they should be prepared for me to answer this time. When I was discharged, all I had in my hands was a plastic bag with things that meant nothing else. An old sweatshirt, a watch without a strap, and my keys to a door that no longer existed. I walked out of the hospital like a person who had accidentally forgotten to be brought back to life for real. No one was waiting. No one asked how I was. There were $8 and 2 checks in my pocket. No house, no car, no wife, not even a dog that never existed. At the bus stop, I took a seat next to an elderly man. He looked at my bag, at my face, and said, "Returning from the war?" I grinned. "Almost, only this time, without a medal." He nodded. "That means you survived." I looked away. I'm not sure yet, but I do know that someone thought otherwise. And as the bus drove me off to who knows where, I held the only document that was truly mine, my discharge papers. It said I was stable, conscious, and capable of independent living. Independent. Let's see. No one met me, no car, no hugs, not even a banal, "Are you okay?" Just automatic doors that closed behind me with a sound like a coffin lid. It was quiet, a little too quiet. I stood on the sidewalk holding the same plastic bag that held my old life, an old sweatshirt, a nearly dead phone, and a watch whose hands had stopped at the day of my hospitalization. In my pocket, $8 and an address that was no longer mine. I went there anyway. I wanted to make sure. I wanted to see with my own eyes what a place looks like where you're no longer welcome, where you're not even remembered. A stranger's car was parked on the street in front of the house. The gate had been repainted. New name on the mailbox, Calvin Roseman. Real estate agent, according to Google. I went around the side of the house. The very yard where Brianna and I had barbecued and slept in the hammock was now scrubbed to the pavement. Not a single thing of ours. Even the chair she liked to sit on with a cup of tea was gone. It was as if we'd never been here. I looked out the window. Through a slit in the blinds, I saw a white kitchen. New, chrome, no sign of life. It's scrubbed to a high shine, a candle on the table. Not for us. I went back outside, looked at the gate. I thought, what if I came in? Just to ask. But her voice was already in my head. Are you crazy? There are strangers here now, and I didn't go. Because I'm the stranger now. I called Ray. He's an old colleague we did a city planning project with. He answered on the first ring. Rick? It's me. You okay? Not quite, but I'm moving. Where are you? I'm at the intersection, by the old house. I'll be right there. Stay there. He arrived 20 minutes later in an old Jeep. He came out, looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. You look like a man who's been replaced in his own life. Get in. I got donuts in the trunk. That's all I can help you with right now. We drove in silence. He turned on the radio, the news, then switched to jazz. Then he turned it off. Listen, he began. There's something I need to show you. What? A video. A video of what? Brianna. It's on her new social networking site. The name of the account is Clean Slate. If you don't want to see it, I won't. Let me see it. He put the phone on the holder. I saw a familiar kitchen. She, in an apron with a glass of wine, laughing. It's a fresh start. Thank you all for supporting me on this journey. Behind her back is a man, young, not a lawyer. He's kind of, smooth, too well groomed for a carpenter. He's holding the hand of a girl about 8 years old. Family is something you choose, not what's forced on you, Brianna added to the camera. I couldn't feel my face. It was like it had been wiped off with sandpaper. They say you left, by yourself, that you were tired, that you couldn't handle it, Ray said quietly. Quit? She told me that you left everything, that you'd gone somewhere, that you didn't answer, and that she was alone. I didn't say anything. My head was throbbing. I didn't know if it was pain or anger, maybe both. We drove to Ray's place. He put me in the guest room, a couch, a lamp, an old floor lamp that smelled of dust. Stay here for a while. I've got coffee and running water. I didn't sleep at night. I was scrolling through my Life from Scratch account, post after post, smiles, trips, renovations. Not a word about me. Just one line under the photo with that man. When you let go of the past, the present opens up. I looked at it and thought, the past is me? So I'm the bag that was thrown off my shoulder, which was uncomfortable, old-fashioned. I'm the architect who spent 18 years paying the mortgage, making breakfast, carrying her dog to the vet when she was sick. And now I'm just, the past? I got up this morning and went out on the town, just for a walk. People walked by. No one recognized me. No one looked. And there was something even lighter about it. It was like I'd been erased not just from my home, but from the city, like a pencil line on a blueprint. All that was left was a trail. I went to the cafe, ordered a coffee. Card didn't go through. $2 cash, only enough for a glass without a lid. I sat by the window and watched couples walk by. Kids, dogs, lives that weren't touched by my paralysis. Who didn't care that I had once lived, loved, built, hoped? And then the phone rang. An unknown number. I answered it. Minus Mr. Thompson? Minus Mr. Thompson? Yes. This is Andrew Rose speaking. I represent the Patient Voice Legal Initiative. We received an anonymous letter regarding your hospital and the transfer of power of attorney. I'm sorry, what? Someone reported that you may have been incapacitated at the time you signed a number of important documents. We'd like to meet. When? Tomorrow. I'll come to your place. I hung up. I stared at the empty cup. And suddenly I realized for the first time in weeks, something had moved. Something other than my memories. I didn't know if it would save anything. But one thing I knew for sure. If someone decides to wipe my name off the paper like a pencil off a plan, this time I'd leave a nail. The next day there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Standing in front of me was a man in a jacket that probably looked more like Ted from accounting than a human rights activist. But the voice was confident. Andrew Rose. Are you Rick Thompson? In a previous life. He grinned. I'm told you haven't lost your irony, and that's all I have left. We sat down at the table. He laid out the papers, showed copies of the very documents, power of attorney, statements, even a fake insurance renewal waiver. The signatures look crude. Even I can see it's not you. It is. We have reason to believe that the actions of your spouse and her representative may fall under the statute of fraud on the assets of an incapacitated person. I nodded. Dry, no outbursts. I'm sorry, he continued. It's just that, usually in these cases, the victims either cry or scream. I've already skipped both stages. Now I'm in the drying stage. Like an old sponge, he smiled. Your strength is that you survived. Known badu. My strength is that I remember everything now. He left the copies and walked away. Said he'd be in touch. He said he'd start the process of contacting the medical center, the insurance company, the bank. And I sat there looking at the paperwork, and suddenly I realized I was afraid. Not for myself, not for the house, for the truth. Because even if it turns out to be a sham, then my whole marriage was a theater, and I was an audience at my own wedding. That night, I wrote Brianna a letter, not to get it back, but so I wouldn't owe myself. You erased me like I was a draft, but you know what happens to drafts. Sometimes the real thing is in them, and everything else is an edited lie. I didn't hit send, just saved the draft. That was enough, because even if you can't get anything back, you can at least call things by their proper names. And I did that, calmly, coldly, and with goddamn sarcasm, which, as it turns out, saves you from insanity better than any morphine. The next morning I woke up before the sun, fog outside the window, as if the world hadn't decided to show me its face. I got up, brewed some coffee, put on the same shabby jacket, and went outside. I had to go. I didn't know where, but it was impossible to stand still. I went to the library, not for the books, but for the silence, which is not oppressive. There in the corner was a computer with access to legal databases. I sat down and started reading about powers of attorney, about falsifications, about liability. Every word sounded like a gunshot. Can be held liable, must prove, has the right. And in the midst of all this bureaucratic verbiage, I saw the most important thing. I was not defenseless. When I got out, there was a new email on my phone. From Andrew. Briefly. The bank has accepted the request. The insurance company has started a check. They didn't expect you to still be alive. I laughed, loud, all over the sidewalk. People turned around and I was relieved, because I guess they really thought I was gone, that I was lying in a ward somewhere, unneeded, sterile, and silent. But I was standing, and I laughed. Because yes, I was in the ICU. Yes, I was being wiped off the face of the earth, but something didn't go according to their plan. And now I'm going back. Not for my stuff, not for the house, for what they couldn't sell. My name. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see the hero put everyone in their place. I came out that day when everything inside was already scorched. No tears, no anger. Just pure, ringing cold. The cold that comes when you have nothing left to lose. Not because you become brave. It's because it's finally clear to you that everything you had has already been taken from you. I wasn't getting revenge. I was just going to get my name back. Because it's been erased in this story, and I'm not a pencil note. The first thing I did wasn't come back to town as a shadow. I came back as a man who had had his right to exist taken away. My voice had been restored. My speech had returned. Now I had another thing to restore: legal reality. I didn't want to put on a show, but I was told, if you want to be heard, speak loudly. And if you want to be heard loudly, turn on the microphone. That microphone was the local TV station. I didn't yell. I just told my story. How I ended up in the emergency room, how everything was sold, how I was made the past. No complaints, just the facts. Like a surgeon describing an operation. People didn't take their eyes off it. A day later, the whole county was watching. 2 days later, half the country. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel dead. On the third day, I got a call from the insurance company's legal department. Minus Mr. Thompson, we're reviewing your case. There's been a report of possible falsification of a power of attorney. Are you serious? I thought you were just playing, who can cover their eyes the fastest? We want to cooperate. All right. Cell phone rings. Let's start with copies of everything they signed on my behalf. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was an architect. I understood structure. I knew where things were holding together and where they were coming apart at the seams. And now I could see their whole story starting to fall apart. Little inconsistencies, signatures that didn't match, handwritings that were suddenly corrected. This wasn't revenge. This was dismantling. Systemic, slow, honest. When I was shown the order suspending operations on the transferred assets a week later, I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. Not from winning. I just exhaled because someone finally said, yes, he exists. That was just the first step. Next, the meeting. She volunteered to come. No lawyers, no theater, just us. She entered the room with confidence. Same gait, same hair, only now in an expensive shade. Sat down, didn't say a word. I looked at her, not with hatred, curiosity, like an archaeologist looking at an old vase, wondering how it cracked. You did the show, she said. Ilian, you set the stage. I just ripped the fabric off. People hate me now. People now see what you did. It's different things. She tried to explain. She talked about being tired, how she felt alone, how she thought I was gone, how she wanted to survive too. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Because the truth is like oxygen. It doesn't need protection. It's just either there or it's not. I didn't know you'd survive, she breathed out. I knew you would, I replied. That phrase stayed between us like a scalpel on a surgeon's table. That was it. Diagnosis made. Expenditure. She was gone. She never came back. But the story remained, and I wasn't about to let it die again. A couple days later, I got a call from a major publication. We want to publish your story. The whole thing, uncut. I don't want sympathy. We don't write for sympathy. We write to let others know what a silent divorce can do. I said yes, not for the glory, but for the sake of those who will also wake up one day in an empty house feeling like they've been erased. The article had facts, dates, screenshots, chains of translations. People read and wrote to me, some in support, some with apologies, and some with their own stories. I became a kind of symbol, not a hero, just a voice that wouldn't shut up. The legal process moved slowly, but steady. The signatures were deemed suspicious. The court ordered a temporary freeze on operations. A review of the actions of the attorney who represented her began. This is a precedent, my lawyer said. Usually these things get buried. You brought it out. And I just went on with my life. Temporary housing, an old laptop, a set of clothes bought secondhand. But I had something that wasn't for sale, reality. For the first time in months, I knew I could go outside and not be afraid someone would call me a shadow. I was a person, visible, audible. The judge asked, "Do you have anything to say?" She was silent. Then she turned to me and, apologized. "I'm sorry. I thought you weren't coming back. I didn't know how to live." I didn't answer, because it wasn't a moment of dialogue. It was a moment of truth. And truth, as you know, doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be puffed up. It just needs to be spoken. When the judge announced the suspension of the deal and the opening of a criminal investigation, there was no applause. But I knew it was over. It was over. The end of the old life. The end of crossing out. The end of silence. I went outside. Autumn, the cold, leaves underfoot. People walked by. Some recognized me, some didn't. But most importantly, I recognized myself. I'm the one who stood up. Not because I'm a hero, but because I didn't disappear. I went to the park, the one where we used to walk. I sat on a bench and just watched. No anger, no pain. It's all still in court, in the documents, on TV. And here there's silence, real silence. Not the kind where you're betrayed. It's the kind where you're no longer afraid. And if anyone asks me how it ended, I'll tell them, I'm breathing again, not loudly, but by myself. A month later, I rented a room in an old house on the outskirts. Wooden walls, creaky floor, and the smell of time. That's where I started writing. Not a book, not a memoir. Letters to myself. One letter every morning. How I feel, what I remembered, what I understand. In one of them I wrote, you don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to not disappear. Even if you're forgotten, even if you're discarded, you can stand up. Without applause, no publicity. Just stand up. I don't check her social media anymore. I don't care what she says anymore, because I've learned to speak for myself. And if you can talk, then you exist. Sometimes people walk by and nod at me. Someone smiles, someone squeezes my hand. And it's not recognition, it's respect. Because each of them once felt what I felt, the silence where you are not. But if you can find the strength to come out of it, then you've already won. I'm not a hero. I'm not a martyr. I'm just a man who was going to be erased. And I stayed. I recently bought myself an old notebook. Leather, like my father's. On the first page, there's only one sentence. You can be forgotten. You can be betrayed, but you cannot be replaced unless you let me. And every time I open it, I'm reminded, this isn't just a story about resuscitation and betrayal. It's a story about how even if you're buried, you can still stand up and say your name out loud. And that means you're alive. 6 months later, I found myself back in the very workshop where my youth had once begun. Tom put a drawing on the table. Do you think you can still do it? He asked. I picked up a pencil. I drew the first line. It was uneven. My hand was shaking. But it was my line. I looked at it and I said, I can do it. I just haven't done it in a long time. I started building again. A small project for a community center. A simple building. But there was something in every brick that brought me back. Not to my old life, but to myself. To who I was before the coma, before the pain, before the betrayal. Every morning I went out into the city. It didn't seem foreign anymore. The people, the cars, the noise, it was all there. And I was there. Because all they wanted to take from me wasn't walls and money, it was the voice. And now it was sounding. When people ask me, would you like to forget everything? I say, no way, because it was only by going through it that I became me. No illusions, without fear, without those who left first when I was weak. And if one day it all comes crashing down again, I already know what to do. Stand up, breathe out, say my name, and start over.